Okay, before we get started, we just want to make sure that Barbara is on, the senior GP consultant that I'll be talking. Barbara, can you say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
Perfect. All right, great. So we will start here in a few minutes with Sean Nichols, and I'll just hand it over to him.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate everybody being on board here today. Now, I do have a few slides I'd like to just go over this afternoon. I'd like to give you guys some great information of what's happening in Microsoft. And I thanks to Jenny for putting all this together. For those of you who don't know Jenny Hall, she is our client care coordinator. And so thank you for putting all of this together for everybody. This is Sean Nichols. I am your client success manager here at OmniVue. And then for those of you that don't know, Barbara Gavron will be on to talk about the year-end webinar. I wanted to first give you some Microsoft updates of what's happening in the community, some updates here at OmniVue, and then we'll go straight into the year-end closing. So for those of you that don't know, there's been a lot of great information that's been happening in the Microsoft world. First off, they changed their mission. They want to, in essence, empower all members, every person in their organizations, to achieve more. Now, they're doing this by using people and the organization as something they're calling digital transformation. Now, what does that really mean? Well, those of you that are using Office and have used Office, throughout your careers and now are using Dynamics, they're combining those technologies, and with the recent acquisition of LinkedIn, they're really leveraging a lot of this application technology and integrating it to enable companies to be more agile and to work across multiple platforms. And that is allowing a lot of companies to be more proficient and better enabled in their careers every day. I wanted to run a quick poll here through everybody. Does anybody on the phone have used or currently using Power BI? I wanted to put a poll up here in the session. If you have, could you mind letting me know? Oh, get some good response. So we've got about 25% of you have used it. Some of you are not sure. Real quickly about Power BI, and know that I'll follow up some information. Power BI, I'm going to tell you, it's an awesome tool. It's something we're seeing a lot of people getting use out of. Power BI allows organizations to optimize, sort, and present their data in really an exceptional way, being able to carve out certain areas of their financial sales data and present that to people inside or outside the organization and really slice and dice it in a way that we haven't seen before. There'll be some future information coming out that we're going to share and some tutorials to get you guys excited about it. But many of our clients struggle every day to be able to, and one of the biggest complaints we have is we can't see our data. We're not getting real-time data. So that is something that we're going to be showing you guys. One other piece of information I'd like to tell you about is something that's exciting to the Microsoft community. Many of you use Management Reporter, or most everybody does these days, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's still moving along strong. But another area that or feedback that clients have been presenting to Microsoft is enhanced reporting solutions. So Microsoft has partnered with Jet Reports. Some of you may be familiar with them already, in providing a more extensive and enhanced solution to companies than Management Reporter can currently provide them these days. Now, most companies, in fact all companies, if you're above GP9, you have access to Jet Express, which is a basic reporting service, if you'd like to see how that works. But they also offer Jet Professional and Jet Enterprise. Again, this will be some information we'll be passing along. It's a nice partnership we've seen out there, and it's providing companies a lot of value, and it might provide you as well. Of course, if you have any questions on that, by all means, let me know, let Mark McClung or Jenny here know, and we'll get you some information on that. And then finally, looking into the roadmap for GP. This is something important to you guys. You want to know what's the future of GP, and this right here, we can provide you this slide without boring you reading it all through, but you'll see that in the coming release of 2018, you're going to have some enhanced workflow, some document attachments, and then some user experience optimization. So, that I believe was released on 12/1, and if you have information out there, then that you want to learn more and talk to us, by all means, let us know. Now, some important things here at OmniVue. A lot of this new technology and this application. If you know anything about OmniVue, we pride ourselves on helping our clients be more agile. It's in our mission statement. And with all the new application reporting enhancements that we're seeing throughout the Microsoft and the Dynamics community, I would personally like to invite each of you to engage with us in what we're calling a complimentary consulting engagement to discuss the future of Microsoft technology, cloud computing, and really how OmniVue can help each of you, see your world and provide increasing value to your Microsoft Dynamics application. This is something you'll see from me and from the team here as follow-ups. No cost to you, but as your business grows and expands, we want to really make sure you're leveraging that technology. So I thank you for let me have the time to talk to you about what's new and exciting in the Microsoft and OmniVue worlds. And with that, I would like to introduce Barbara Gavron. Barbara is a senior consultant here with OmniVue at GP. She's got 13 years of GP consulting work in the dynamic space. Additionally, she is a client. She's used GP as a controller in a publicly held company. So she's got experience on both sides of the table and can empathize with folks on that side. She is a CPA with the state of Florida. She's also a graduate from Villanova in accounting. And in a previous job was an auditor for one of the big four accounting firms. So she's got a big, long, extensive history in this work, and we're really honored to have her as a staff member here at OmniVue. So with that, Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. I appreciate that great introduction, Sean. Love my job, and I am glad to be here to share the knowledge that I have in regard to what you need to do to close your books at year end. In case it was not made obvious when we sent out the invites, we are going to just touch core modules today. We will not be discussing payroll or human resources or inventory. We're going to be discussing general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and fixed assets. So with that being said, the first thing that I would like to just put out there is to say, how do you decide which module you need to close first? And there really isn't a specific order, but in my mind, I feel like there is an order that's necessary. So for me, I generally will close receivables first. And the reason for that is because I have the most control over my receivables. I know when I'm finished billing out my customers for the end of the year. So I do receivables first. Then, just because receivables and payables kind of go hand in hand, I would close my payables next. And part of that is because a lot of times payables feeds into fixed assets. So we want to make sure that anything that's going to be related to fixed assets gets pushed through to that module before we close it. Unlike in the GP General Ledger year-end close, which in the most recent versions has the ability to undo a year-end, you cannot undo the closing of AP, AR, or fixed assets. So that's why I do those three first, make sure that I get them all set before I move on to my general ledger. So the next question is when? When do I do these? So as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, with receivables, I do it as soon as I feel like I have billed out everything that I'm going to build. Excuse me, bill, not build. Then accounts payable, I generally wait a little while. However, there's a little nuance that goes with both accounts payable and accounts receivable, and that is, do I really need to run the year-end process for accounts payable and accounts receivable? There's been a lot of dialogue about this, and I'm going to let you make your own decision, but I'm going to show you what exactly happens when you run the year-end process for both of these two modules. So if I come out here to sales and I go to the summary, you're going to notice that I've got a year-to-date column, a last year column, and a life-to-date column. When you run the year-end process, it takes the year-end values, the year-to-date, and pushes it into the last year column. And then it brings the year-to-date column all down to 0, which is fine for accounts receivable because, as I said previously, you have the ability to control when you've gotten to the end of your billings for that last month. However, you may not have as much flexibility in the payables side. Sometimes it may take several weeks before you get all of the invoices in for the payables that occurred for expenses prior to your month end. The problem lies in the fact that when you do your year-end close, it doesn't look at the dates of the transactions that it's closing out into the prior period. It just looks at the activity since the last day that you closed the year previously. So if you have never done the AP close and you perform one today and you've been in business for several years, what will happen is what's showing in year to date is really inception to date. And it's going to push that value into last year. So at that point, your last year values are really not valid because they're not really last year. They're inception to date up until the last time I closed my year. And then, of course, your year to date will start accumulating again. However, if you put in an invoice, say on January 6th, and you don't close your year end until January 10th, that January 6th invoice will still be considered last year. So here's where you guys need to make your own decision on how you want to handle this. The general rule of thumb is if you need to do data entry for current or new year transactions, you're going to put it in a batch and leave that batch unposted until after you have done the year-end process for everything up until 12/31. And I'm going to talk about 12/31 as the year-end. I do recognize that you all might be on a fiscal year, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to refer to December 31st as the year-end. So if you get invoices for December 31st or earlier, you can and should post those. But anything after December 31st, you're going to want to keep them in an unposted batch. And then once you run your year-end process, then you can go ahead and process the current year's transactions. And that will keep the dollar values in the right buckets. However, if you're running a trial balance, by not closing your year end, it is not going to affect what buckets they fall into. The aging will still be based on the date of the transaction and whatever your payment terms are. So if you choose to ignore closing AP or AR, the effect will be that the dollar values and the quantities in your year-to-date column will start to accumulate and will continue to accumulate, and your year-to-date and your life-to-date, as you see in front of you, will always be the same, and you will never see a last year. So I'm going to take a quick break here and just find out from Jenny, do we have any questions about this right now?
Let me see. I don't see any questions at the moment.
Okay. So if we don't have any questions about those two, what I will do is just quickly show you what the screen looks like when you want to perform your year-end close for AP and AR. And we're going to come out here under routines in your purchasing area page, and you're going to do the year-end close. Notice here, I've never done a year-end close. That's why my year-to-date and my inception-to-date were the same. And you simply are going to close your year. If you decide to do this, you might want to consider making a printed copy. And when I say printed, I don't necessarily mean on hard copy paper. Please, in your mind, associate printing with potentially PDF versions. But you might want to just do a printout of your trial balance at the time that you're doing your year-end process. And now would be a good time to talk about backups. You're going to hear me say backup, 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 and backup some more. That's because while we never anticipate there being a change in cabin pressure, as they say on the airlines, that possibility always exists that something could go wrong during the process. So we do recommend that you continually stop in between your year-end processes and you make backups and note them accordingly. So your first backup would say pre-year-end, and then your next one might be post-AP. The next one would be post-AR. The next one post-assets. And then the last one would be post-general ledger. And if at any time during your process you need to restore from backup, you will have one. The next question people usually ask is, do people need to be out of GP when I'm performing my year-end process? The answer is no, they don't have to be, but I recommend it. The reason for that is because if someone's in GP and they perform a transaction between the time you took your backup and the time you finish your year-end process, if we need to restore from backup, we're not going to truly have the most up-to-date information in our backup. So effectively, any transactions that they did will be lost. Also, if they're posting at the same time as we're trying to run the year-end process, that may cause an interference that could ultimately affect the finality of your year-end process. So I generally recommend that you're going to do your year-end processes in the morning. You're going to let your users know before you start that you would like them to stay out of GP, and that you'll notify them when you're done. For those of you that are on some of the more recent versions of GP, we have a nice new little tool out here. And what we can do is we can take the company offline. You'll have to forgive me, we're on the demo server, so I have to look this up here. So what I can do is I can take this particular company offline. So if people logged out properly the night before, then before they even get to the office in the morning, I'm going to put that company offline. And then this is the default message that they would get should they try to log into that company. You could also create a custom, and you could say, we're doing year-end processing. Please see Joe Smith. If you have any questions, we'll notify you when you can get back in. And then once you're done, you come back out here and you're going to remove that company and it goes back online. So if we have no additional questions about AP and AR as far as the year-end processing is concerned, I want to talk about a related year-end process in regard to 1099s. Today is December 14th. We've got 17 days before this year ends. If you are missing any 1099s or any W-9s for 1099 vendors, you are probably not going to be able to get those people's attention at this point in time. So the first thing that I'd like to say is if you do not already have a procedure in place that says I will not make the first vendor payment to a vendor who is a 1099 vendor if I don't have their tax information, I highly recommend that you put that in place now. They will be more motivated to give you their tax ID if you're holding on to their payment. If they refuse to give you their tax ID number, the IRS suggests that you do a 25% withholding on that. So once again, they're going to be motivated to give you the information that you need because you are withholding payments. So periodically during the year, I do suggest that you go out and check your 1099 vendors to make sure that they have tax ID numbers. Something that I like to do is to create a smart list that looks at my 1099 vendors and tells me whether or not I have any that are missing tax IDs. So if I come down here to the purchasing and I select the vendors, you'll notice that there's a canned report already out here, 1099 vendors. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. So what I want to do is I want to add a column. And what column do I want? I think it might be called tax ID, so I'm going to look it up. Sure enough, tax ID number. There we go. So I've got all these vendors that are 1099 vendors, but yet I've got some that are missing their tax IDs. Well, how does that help me? Well, in my search, I'm going to say where my tax ID number is equal to blank. That returns to me just those vendors that are missing their tax ID. And now, when I save this, I'm going to call this 1099 vendors without tax ID. And when I add it, instead of adding it as a favorite, I'm going to add it as a favorite and a reminder. And it wants to know, when do you want to be reminded? I want to know when the number of records in this smart list is greater than 0. In other words, if I have any vendors at all that are marked as 1099 but do not have a tax ID number, I want you to let me know. So when I say OK, I'm going to go back now to my home page. And in this case, I don't have my reminder set up, so I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to turn them back on. And you're going to notice I now have a reminder here, 1099 vendors without a tax ID. And it even tells me how many. And I can simply click on that and it will open up my smart list. Let's take this one step further. I can now double click on this vendor if I know that I want to send him a letter, and I can go out here to my letter writing assistant. I'm going to select my request for W-9. I think. Yep. Request for W-9. I'm going to click next. Next. I won't fill this out, but this is where you would put in your name, title, your phone number, and email, and we're going to click finish. What's happening now is there's a mail merge between the information in GP and Word, and in Word is this template. Let's hope that this works. This is a demo server, guys, so I do apologize if this won't pop up. But it basically fills in the letterhead at the top of the document that comes from your company ID, and then it addresses it to the vendor. There's the body of the letter that says, you know, please send us your W-9. There's one attached, and then it will sign it based on how you've put in your name and title and whatnot. And I might just have to kill this here. Well, we're going to say yes. Okay, so that's how to do it for one individual vendor. You could also, if you wanted to create all of these letters at one time, you could come up here to the Word button on the Smart List as a whole, and you can prepare this for all of your vendors. And in this case, I'm not going to go any further. If I know I happen to have one on my desk for Dolecki Catering, I can turn it off, and then I would just follow through the same process. So now, once I'm sure that I have tax ID numbers, the next thing that I want to do is I want to look at what values are appearing on my 1099 edit. And you can get that from going to the Print 1099 routine. So there's two print icons, and by the way, I have my menu bar set to be the menu bar, not the action pane. In the most recent version of GP, the toolbar has got icons as well as the words. In my personal choice, I've decided that I would like to stay with just the basic toolbar. So if yours looks a little different, that's why. It's not that we have two different versions of GP, it's just on my user preferences, I have selected to use the menu bar and not the action pane. So in this case, this printer icon up here on the left is to actually print the forms. But what I want to do now is I want to print my edit list. So I'm going to get that by printing this icon in the upper right-hand corner. What I'm looking for, I don't have any. What I would be looking for is who is showing up on my list, how much is their 1099 amount, and do I have a tax ID? This is a second place for you to confirm that. If you happen to know that you have a vendor that should be appearing on this list and they are not on this list, then perhaps you're going to do some reconnaissance before the fact and go out and figure out, did they not get listed as 1099 vendors properly? You may find that there's somebody on that list that doesn't belong there. So this is the time that you have to make the adjustments before you get to crunch time. You don't want to be finding out on January 1st or January 31st, even worse, that you're missing a tax ID number or somebody should have been recorded as a 1099 vendor and they're not. The next thing that you would do when you print your edit list is count how many 1099s you're going to need. If you need 10, then I think you would be safe with buying one package of 25. If you need 25, buy two packages of 25 and run your 1099s early And if you need to, you can return the unused package. But on January 31st, if you only bought one package and your printer totally chewed up all of your 1099 forms, if you go to Office Depot and they are out of 1099 forms, they're not ordering anymore. And you're going to be calling your friends around town, asking them if they have any 1099s to spare. So review your 1099 edit list and estimate how many 1099 forms you're going to need, and make sure that you buy a sufficient quantity. When you run your 1099s, notice down here in the bottom left-hand corner that GP will now also print your 1096 form. So this is something relatively new in most recent versions of GP, and we finally got Microsoft to listen to us, and the system will now print your 1096 form. Jenny, do we have any questions regarding 1099s?
Let me check here. It looks like there's a question regarding, does not closing AP impact 1099 filing process?
Does not. The 1099 bucket is updated when a payment is made on a 1099 invoice, and it pushes that dollar value into the 1099 year-to-date field. So if you do not run your year-end process, you will still get proper 1099 values for the current year. Okay?
Okay, great. That's the only question so far.
Okay. I just want to quickly touch on this one utility, the update 1099 information. If you do happen to find any vendors that are improperly classified, this new update 1099 information is a godsend. If I have a vendor that was not properly marked and I've made payments to him all year long and nothing has been recorded as a 1099, I can actually come up here and say, I want to update both the vendor and his transactions, and I can take him from not a 1099 vendor to whatever his proper classification is over here. One thing to be extremely cautious of is make sure you select the vendor and push it into the restrictions box before you click process. Otherwise, you will update every vendor that you have because you have not restricted it to this one vendor. So please be very cautious. This is another reason why we tell you make backups periodically throughout your process. This could quickly develop into a nightmare. Okay. So now we've got AP and AR closed, and we're ready to move on to the fixed asset module. With the fixed asset module, it gets a little bit dicey because of the fact that you may be going through your year-end audit and your auditors are going to say this should have been capitalized or this should not have been capitalized. Unfortunately, there's no way to undo your fixed asset year-end, so I don't feel like it's necessary to wait until your year-end audit is complete before running your fixed asset year-end process. Part of the reason for that is because you cannot run depreciation in your new fiscal year until you have closed out the prior year. Unlike in the general ledger or AP or AR, you can process payments after you get to your new year. But you cannot run depreciation in your new year until the previous year is closed. So if you think of your depreciation as a bucket that holds 12 cups of depreciation. You would not be able to pour another cup of depreciation into that bucket until you dump it. So that's basically what happens in the fixed asset year-end process. It's very, very quick. As a matter of fact, sometimes if you blink, you're going to miss it. If you happen to have more than one fixed asset book, you should run all of your books because you want them all to be in sync with each other. And you would click continue. What that does is it goes out to each one of the assets and it takes the year-to-date depreciation, same as what we had previously for AP and AR, and it moves it into the inception to date or the last year. And it opens up that year-to-date bucket back to 0. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to show you in SmartList, under the fixed asset module in the books, there are columns that talk about year-to-date. And I've got my year-to-date depreciation amount. This is the column that's going to be set back to 0 when you run your fixed asset year-end. How do I prepare for my fixed asset year-end? First thing is, when you're closing your AP module, make sure that all of your batches are posted. So if anything is going to come from AP over to fixed assets, you want it to make its way there before you close your fixed asset module, and do not miss out on adding an asset. Once you have all of your assets added, make sure that you then process any of your disposals, or in this case, retirements. Make any changes that you need to make, and then you're going to run your depreciation for your 12th month. If you try to run year end and you have not depreciated every asset through the year end, you'll actually get an error message. So it's very generous of GP to do that for you, because that way it's not going to let you advance into the next year and then miss out on some depreciation on an asset if you haven't been brought current as far as your depreciation is concerned. So you're going to want to click your depreciation. You're going to post it over to the general ledger. And when I say to the general ledger, for those of you that are not aware, there is no setting in the postings that allows fixed asset transactions to post through the general ledger. Everything from fixed assets posts to the general ledger. And the analogy that I usually give is I can invite you to my house, but I don't have to let you through the door. So when you click GL posting underneath the fixed asset routine, it's going to create your journal entry, push it over to the financial module, and it will sit there and wait for you to post it. Before you do your fixed asset year end, again, please make a backup. This was especially important in earlier versions of GP because there did not used to be the ability to run a depreciation report after the fact for a previous date. However, in later versions of GP, we now can run a prior date's depreciation report. So not as critical to have a backup out there that has my prior year-end's depreciation. It's more for safety's sake if something blows up during the process, because now you can go ahead and run depreciation or just reprint a report as of a previous day. Does anybody have any questions in regard to the fixed asset year-end close?
Let me give everyone a couple minutes here, and we'll just see if anyone has any questions. Okay, I don't see any right now.
Okay, then let's move on to the mother of all year-end closings, and that is your financial year-end close. Usually for me, the prep work is more laborious than the actual running of year-end. The first thing that you're going to want to do is check to make sure that all of your GL account numbers are classified properly. If I were to open up a new general ledger account number, notice that the posting type defaults to balance sheet. If you get in a hurry and you add a new GL account number that's really a P&L account, but you forget to change it from balance sheet to profit and loss, it's not going to act the proper way when you run your year-end process. More often than not, if something is misclassified, it's going to be a P&L account that's improperly classified as a balance sheet. How do I figure this out? I like my friend SmartList to help me out here. So I'm going to start underneath the financial section, underneath accounts, and I've only got the one that's out here. And what I want to do is I want to add a column. And the column I want to add is for my main account number. Now, I am making a big assumption here, and that assumption is that my main account number has been configured in such a way that it's obvious what the assets are, liabilities, equity, and then P&Ls. So in my accounting career, assets started with a 1, liabilities started with a 2, equity with a 3, and then your P&L stuff is going to be from 4 up until possibly 9. If your chart of accounts is not structured in this way, then what I'm about to show you will not work, but hopefully you would be able to structure a query that would work for you. So in this case, what I want to do is a search where the main account segment is less than, so in other words, I want it to be in my balance sheet area, so less than 4,000, but yet it's got the posting type of P&L. And lucky for me, there's nothing in there. But I'd like to hold on to this report and use it. So I'm going to save this as a favorite, and I'm going to call this misclassified balance sheet accounts. And I'm going to add it as a favorite and a reminder. When do I want to be reminded? When the number on this list is greater than 0. I'm just going to come right up here to my search criteria, and I'm going to switch this around. I'm going to now say where this is greater than 3,999, and my posting type is equal to balance sheet. And if anything, this is where I would probably expect to have my issues. Well, look at this. I've got some in here. First thing I want to point out is the account category of 0. This infers that this is an allocation account. So I can ignore those. This one here is a unit account. So basically, we can ignore anything where the account category is a 0. But up here in my project billings, this is sales, but yet it's shown as a balance sheet. So I certainly want to be very in tune with this. And when I see this, I'm just going to double click to drill back and I'm going to click on profit and loss and save. And then if I refresh, I now have one less account that's out here. Okay, in this case, these are misclassified income statement accounts, and I would like to be reminded when the number is greater than 0. And so what I'm going to do is close that out, go back to my home page to show you I now have a new reminder on my home page for misclassified income statement accounts. And I'm going to come out here and analyze what's here. And obviously you would go through each of these and make adjustments as necessary until you come down to where there are no account categories other than a 0. So that's the very first thing that you're going to want to do. If you leave these on your home page, hopefully you're addressing them as they pop up, and when you get to year end, it's not going to be an issue anyway. The next thing that you're going to want to do is go out to your financial section, and you're going to go to your setup underneath general ledger, and you're going to confirm that the account number you've set up as retained earnings is still a valid number. That's where you want your P&L to close to. And sure enough, this is retained earnings. Next thing, GP allows you to post back 1 fiscal year. So at the present, we're in the year 2017. If I found an entry that belonged to 2016 right now, I could post back to 2016. However, if I close 2017, I have closed 2016. I was going to say forever, but it's not forever anymore because most recent versions of GP now allow an undo year-end process. So if you find out that something belongs in a previous year, you do have the ability to undo that year-end closing. On the year-end closing window, bottom left, reverse a historical year. So it will peel back a year, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, it's important to look for unposted batches and be very cognizant of the date that those transactions want to print to. So you could, if you want, go to the routine for master posting, and it will show you all of the batches that have yet to be posted. Unfortunately, this doesn't tell me very much. So what I like to do is I create a smart list, and underneath my financial and then account transactions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a column out here, and I want to bring in what is my batch or my document status. And what would concern me is I want to make sure that I've got nothing in work that's going to cause a problem. So in my search, I'm going to say my document status is equal to work. And then I would sort my transaction dates in ascending order, and I know that because the caret is pointing upwards. And just make sure that I don't have anything out there for the year 2016. Once I've got that done, I might want to save this. It's a nice one to have. The next thing that I want to do is print my detailed trial balance. And please remember earlier when I said print, I don't necessarily mean on paper. You can come out here and print out 2 PDFs. a detailed trial balance so that you have something in hand to refer back to should something happen. So now it's time for us to run the year end. So we're going to go back to our routines, click on year end closing, and then we're going to click close year. Be careful. A lot of people have a habit of double clicking. If you double click, this will close 2 years, which is part of the reason why this reverse historical year is here. It was a common mistake. So click close year 1 time. When you do, you're going to see a progress bar start filling in right above reverse historical year. When it gets to the end, that's not the end of the process. When it gets to the end, it's going to then create your year-end journal entry. This journal entry cannot be reprinted. So when the journal entry itself pops up, decide if you're going to print it to PDF or to a hard copy, and then and only then can you close this year-end closing box. And that is basically the end of your year-end closing. But I'd like to just discuss one more thing, and that is the management of your fiscal periods. I typically recommend that you keep a rolling 3 months worth of periods open. So if today is December, I might be still closing November. So I might have the financial portion of November open. I've got all of my 2017 financial sales and purchasing open. And then going forward to 2018, I might also have financial sales and purchasing open. What's the big deal? Well, if I'm doing a journal entry, the system assumes that the date is based on what fiscal year you're in. For those of you that don't know, you can type in just the month and the day, and the system knows what year it is. 1, 2, 3, 1. So if I was in early part of January and I wanted to post an adjustment to 12/31 of 17, and it's the year 2018, and I simply type 1231, it's going to assume you mean 12/31 of 18. If you have only 3 periods open, at this point, December of 2018 is not going to be open, and you're going to get a warning that says this fiscal period is closed. And that should give you the impetus to look at your transaction date to realize, oh, I didn't put in the right date, right? So that's part of the reason why you want to keep your fiscal periods managed. You also don't want anybody back posting into a period of time where you may have already produced your financial statements. So please manage your fiscal periods in such a way that you can prevent some of the heartaches that people have undergone. Now at this point, you notice that I had 2018 already open. Now is when I would create 2019, because I would want to have had 2018 already open in case I had reversing journal entries that need to back out on January 1. So I'm simply going to type 2019, and I'm going to click calculate, and it will go out and it will look at my fiscal calendar, and it's going to create all of my periods for me. And then I'm going to close them all, and now 2019 is open. And when you get ready to do your 2018 year end next year, you'll open 2020 to give yourself the ability to reverse into January of 2019. And that, my friends, is the end of the year end webinar. do we have any questions on anything that I just covered?
Let's see, I'm just going to wait a few seconds to see if anyone types anything here. Okay, I don't see any questions. I will hand it over to Sean to close it out.
Okay, everybody. I want to thank everybody for your time today, and hopefully you got some good information off the webinar. If you have any other questions on this or any of the topics we talked about at the beginning, please feel free to shoot those over to client care or myself. We appreciate your continued partnership with us, and we look forward to working with you next year. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Barbara. Great job.